want to thank everyone for attending today's meeting of the Budget and Resource Allocation Committee. I believe today's meeting will be a fairly short meeting. We have two main items on the agenda. One is the governor's budget, and the second is our financial projections as of now for the year. We do have minutes to approve. However, without a quorum, we'll not be able to approve the minutes. So move on to the budget update. On January 10th, the governor released the proposed budget for our upcoming fiscal year 2018-19. And the budget overall, there's some good news about the budget, some very strong parts of it, but there's also some challenging areas. So for PCC, the biggest challenge is that the capital outlay project, our U-Building project, was originally 100% state funded project, and the governor and Department of Finance are now making that a 50% match project. So 50% match project would mean that the college would need to come up with $30 million, approximately $30 million to complete the project. On top of that, the state is not funding all of the escalations, all the cost escalations. So over a 5-year period, $60 million is if we could build the project right now, but over a 5-year period, raw materials go up, especially in this market where there's high demand, a lot of construction going on, both residential, commercial construction. It drives up the price of raw materials, drives up the price of labor. So we're projecting that those cost escalations over the next 5 years until the project is complete will cost between $6 to $8 million. So that would not be state funded. So as it looks now, based on the proposed budget, we would need to cover half of the $60 million plus $6 to $8 million for cost escalations. So we'd have to come up with $38 million. And we really just do not have $38 million that we could allocate toward this. That doesn't even, that's well beyond all of our reserves. So basically, if this is signed into law on June 30th, it would basically kill the project. But we're still working with the Chancellor's office, and there's a chance that with the May revise and when the budget's finally signed into law, that could be removed. So that's a possibility. But the governor and Department of Finance, they called out 2 capital outlay projects. One was Pasadena, and the other one was a San Francisco City College project. Ours is $60 million. San Francisco's project was $100 million. So it really appears that the motivation is that both San Francisco and Pasadena are affluent areas that have the capacity to pass local bonds. That appears to be the motivation why we were singled out to provide match, and that's consistent with the bond was passed $9 billion, the Prop 51 bond for K through 14. Of the $9 billion, $2 billion was for community colleges. So it's there's 72 districts, and it appears that the intention is to make sure that all districts have the ability to receive funding, especially districts that don't have the capacity to pass a local bond. So they just don't have that option. So from that standpoint, that appears to be the argument that's for going in this direction and changing the match. But it's unfortunate for the U-Building project. And to make matters even worse, we'd be required to spend $38 million of our local dollars, and we still won't have the capability of making any changes to the FPP that was submitted to the Chancellor's office 6 or 7 years ago. So it's it's one thing if we have to spend additional resources, but if we can't make any changes, if we can't increase the size of the building to meet our needs, it's very problematic for us. A lot of people have voiced the opinion that the new building won't meet all of our needs, especially the faculty who actually use the building. So it's something that we're going to look at carefully and make a recommendation to the board at the February meeting about the project in general. Does anybody have any questions about the U building?
Yes, I have one question. If for any reason, let's say they give us 30 million right now, but like you said before, it's in times, whatever we need is the money we're getting it.
Yeah.
And let's say, okay, we want to get another bond from the city of Pasadena, this area, to get that rest of the money.
Right.
But this thing takes like another 2 years. So it's still those 30 millions, they're going to be there by when we get the rest of the money, or we're losing those 30 millions by when we vote for another.
That's an excellent question, and a very good point.
It's going to play?
We can't say, oh, can you say that for us?
Yeah, exactly.
We're gonna go out for the local bond and pass the bond, because that would take at a minimum 2 years to pass a bond and then issue the bond.
Exactly.
So it takes time, but we have to be moving on the project right now. So we're already like 1 year into it, and it has to be completed by the year 2021. So really, it's not a viable option for us. If we had a bond in place, that would be the only option to go with. But right
So
now,
the state wouldn't extend our time?
no.
In other words, you're not going to add anything.
Yeah. And it's, we shared this at the board meeting last night, and, some comments were made about the design of the building, about the facade, the look of the building, not necessarily, matching the architecture that currently exists on campus. While we do have some buildings that don't match, that was a valid point. But again, this project was submitted with all the detailed plans about 6 or 7 years ago, including the look and siding for the building. And we don't have flexibility in changing that at this point in time. So if we were to pull this and pass a bond and come back later, then we could, completely redesign the building that meets all of our needs. But it's just a matter of time. So with the budget, there's, some other news. There's COLA for next year. Currently in the proposed budget, COLA is at 2.51%, which is a relatively decent number compared to what we've seen last year. Or the year we're currently in, it was 1.56%. So hopefully the 2.51 sticks and it's signed into law with at June 30th. There's 1% growth funding, so our FTS could grow. However, the college itself has really set an internal cap on where we think we should be based on our facility capabilities, serving 24,200 FTS, and that's where we are now. We feel that's the number that we can serve our students well. So more than likely we'll not be going after that 1% growth in FTS. But for next year, 18-19, the funding formula that the Chancellor's Office will use is changing. So currently the funding model is based on SB 361, which provides parameters on how funding is provided to the different districts, the 72 districts of the system. And each college really receives a basic allocation depending on its size. So depending if you're a large, small, or medium college, you would receive a certain base amount to cover general expenses of the college. The remainder is allocated based on FTES, so the number of students that you serve. Under the new model that's proposed, 50% of the funding would be based on FTES, 25% based on completion, and student completion is measured by degrees completed or transfer. So, currently, that's 25%. It's more of a performance-based model of funding, and the governor and Department of Finance are trying to go in the direction more that the K-12 are funded under the local control funding formula. So it's basing the funding more on performance. And then the remaining 25% is based on the economic factors, the economic conditions of the district's population. So that could have a negative impact on us, because the idea is that districts which operate with a lower economic conditions would receive, more funding to help boost up, the educational offerings for the students. So we could see a cut in our funding as a result of that. And just to put things into perspective, a 1% cut in our funding is approximately $1 million. So, if there's a 5% cut as a result of the new funding formula, that would be a very material number for us. It would be very painful to absorb that. So it's very important that our college continues generating the FTS that we currently generate, but also placing a focus on completion rates and transfer rates of our students, making sure that all of our services are in place. We have an enrollment plan that supports students' continuation of their classes, and hopefully things will pan out. The first year of the change of the transition to the new funding formula, which is next year, 18-19, will be held harmless. So, based on those parameters, let's say we should be receiving a 3% cut, right? We would still receive the same amount of funding that we received this current year. So there's a held harmless during the transition period, but the year following, there's no guarantee of any held harmless. So it's something that we're watching very closely. How the funds will be allocated has not been spelled out. We're waiting for trailer building, which will explain exactly how the different measures will be spelled out. Also included in the budget, which is good news early on, is instructional equipment money, scheduled maintenance dollars of $275 million, and we would receive about 2% of that based on our FTEs. Yeah, $275.2 million, and it's one-time funding. So that would definitely help with replacements of a lot of our equipment and our scheduled maintenance needs at the college. Those are really the main items of the budget. I don't know, Wakanya, have both of you were in Sacramento, if you have anything to add.
We covered it, yeah.
Okay.
Those were the biggest things.
Does anyone have any questions? Dan?
Yeah, I just, the 25% from the economic condition of the district population, are they talking about our students or the community?
That hasn't
Because
been.
it's a big difference.
That hasn't really been spelled out. I imagine it's going to be the community that we serve. Our entire district, the community. So the income levels, the employment rates, measures of that nature, the household income. Because when you look at our students, and I don't know if it's going to include the students that we serve, because a large percent of our students come from outside of our district. So we're going to look at their economic conditions. So all of that will come with the trailer building, which, as far as spelling out how it's intended that this be measured.
So I think at least just to chime in, the K through 12, it was based on the group. So it was based on like homeless students, ESL, low income, and foster. So it was based on the student base, not where they came from. But I don't know, this 25% sounds very different from how K through 12 is doing it.
As soon as I hear it, I'll definitely share it with everyone. But yes,
So, and what is the rationale for that? I mean, what is the...
it's really just going more toward performance-based and the needs of the college in the area that the college is serving. So if it's a low economic area, it's intended to provide additional funding to those areas, just to beef up the services, to bring, provide more services for the students.
But if it's taking away money from a wealthier, we don't get money from our community, we get our funding from the state.
Yeah.
So if they, I mean, I don't mind them supplementing lower income areas because, for whatever reason, but
depend on.
If you live in an area like ours, it's somewhat mixed, but
Yeah,
they're taking away money.
Yeah.
It's not like we're getting money from the community here. We don't, I mean, our funding comes straight from the state, not from the local.
Right.
you're right, I agree with you. So it's, we'll have to wait for the trailer bill language, and there'll be a lot of negotiation and talks, a lot of input that's provided before we get to the May revise and the budget that's finally signed into law. But I hear you. Okay, so if there's no other questions or comments,
Bless you.
we'll move on to our projections. So at the board meeting last night, our 311Q was approved by the board, and our current projections are indicating that our performance, our income levels, our expense levels are all very consistent with the budget that was adopted in September. So right now, everything looks in line with that, so we don't have any changes in our projections, which is good news. We're operating as intended. So revenues are flowing in. From the state level, economic conditions are still very strong. Unemployment rates low, below 5%. Revenue at the state level is slightly above the budget, so things are flowing at the state level and also flowing into community colleges. So it's all good news with the projection. And just to provide a brief update, we will be having interviews for firms which will potentially manage our irrevocable trust, and that will be held tomorrow. So we're interviewing 2 firms that responded to our RFP. So that's really all I had. If there's any questions about anything or any comments, I'd be happy to go into more detail on anything. No? Okay, so our future meetings are noted on the agenda. Our next meeting will be on February 22nd. Is there a motion to adjourn? So, thank you. Thank you very much for attending today.